It may be the biggest story on Earth, but it's one of the hardest to grasp. Since the beginning, the landscape has given rise to life. Life, in turn, has defined and redefined the landscape. A perfect dance of chance and change. A myriad of species interacting, sustaining, driving one another to evolve. And no one species has altered the planet more than man. 1,000 years ago, the human race numbered 300 million. Today, we are 6 billion. Soon, we'll be 10 billion. Yet in a few startling environments, at once pristine and imperiled, the ancient dance continues. "2,000 years ago, human beings first arrived on the shores of Madagascar. A giant island unlike any place else on Earth. Home to vivid settings and unique creatures, exotic and endangered, such as the golden-crowned sifaka. Some call it the 8th continent. Many species here exist nowhere else. Scientists call places like Madagascar hotspots, regions where life still emerges in wild bursts and unexpected patterns, treasure troves threatened by human development.
Madagascar is one of the priority biodiversity hotspots on our planet. This concept of hotspots is very interesting. It was first developed by a British ecologist, Norman Myers, back about 15 years ago now, in the late 80s. And what it does is recognize that biodiversity is not evenly distributed over the surface of the planet. Rather, it's concentrated very heavily in a limited number of areas, and many of these areas are the same ones that are most heavily impacted by human activities.
As development has spread, these critical regions have suffered. Logging, farming, and other uses have claimed as much as 95% of some hotspots' original vegetation, one of the basic building blocks of biodiversity.
Well, hotspots really are a microcosm of the debate that goes on globally about the interaction between man and the environment, and protecting of species versus providing jobs for our population and for our people.
In these areas, which serve as incubators for many forms of life, the pressure is intense to satisfy human needs, desires, and ambitions, often at the expense of the natural world, as has occurred frequently in Madagascar. Much has gone badly here. When forests die, complex ecosystems disappear, leaving a landscape scarred beyond recognition.
Take a look at this. This is just a tragic example of misuse of land.
Conservationist Russ Mittermeier has spent nearly 3 decades studying the plight of Madagascar's environment.
Now, it's important to recognize, too, that this isn't something that's happened over the course of geological time. This is not like the Grand Canyon. When I was a kid, 50, 55 years ago, this was probably still covered in forest, perhaps as recently as 20 or 30 years ago. And in just the blink of an eye, you've wound up going from a beautiful forest system full of life to something like this, which is basically a desert. There's virtually nothing living in this area. And it's just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse until more and more of this country erodes into the ocean.
Despite devastating erosion throughout this 1,000-mile-long island, Madagascar remains one of the planet's richest biological settings, offering insights into evolution and encounters with species made rare by loss, as well as moments of unparalleled beauty. Here, old questions rise. What is our responsibility to other species? What is our stewardship of this planet? Hundreds of millions of years ago, this island was part of Southeast Africa. Then the Earth itself pulled and tugged, tearing loose a giant slab of continent. The 350-mile-wide island kept moving until 200 miles separated her from the mainland, not far geologically, but great enough for an epic adventure.
It's a truly unique area. It's the largest oceanic island, that is the largest island that hasn't had any recent connections to a continental area. It's the 4th largest island on Earth. It's a little bit bigger than the state of California, a little bit smaller than the state of Texas. And in this area you have just an unbelievable evolutionary experiment. It's a living laboratory that's unlike any place else on Earth.
To the east stretch 800 miles of tropical rainforest. In the south, the land goes to spiny desert. Western Madagascar has dry, deciduous forest. To the north, the forest shifts dramatically between dry and moist. Lost at sea, untouched by the hand of man, a paradise grew in isolation, supporting an amazing density of life.
Madagascar got separated from the African landmass about 160 million years ago. All plants and animals that were trapped there or evolved in total isolation in Madagascar became unique to the world. And we can name among the 15,000 plants found in Madagascar, 85% of them are strictly endemic, which means that there is no other place on Earth where you're going to find these species of plants.
On Madagascar, climate, ground cover, nutrition, water, and other elements change dramatically and suddenly. So creatures change too. And they keep on changing. Scientists here to study known species often find new species. In 2003, news from northern Madagascar stunned the universe of insect science. Villagers from the remote Bobancora forest showed researchers what may be the world's largest scorpion, Heteroscorpion magnus. Local people had long known of the poisonous insects, which can grow to be more than a foot long, but scientists had never recorded them. Now a man from the Bobancora has brought more specimens. Once cataloged and measured, the insects will be preserved and shipped to a laboratory to advance knowledge of this extraordinary insect. So little known that this is the first footage of Heteroscorpion magnus in the wild. A find like this could only have happened in a hotspot like Madagascar, where life bursts all boundaries of expectation. Stick insects and other species grow enormous, like the palm-sized Madagascar silk spider. This tree dweller spins webs that can be 6 feet across. While feeding, the silk spider spies litter in its web. Nothing will do but to neaten up before finishing its meal. Madagascar's insect life is not only varied, but voracious. With so many mandibles to feed, little goes to waste. One animal's leavings become another's buffet. This peregrine falcon has just made a kill, an egret. The scent of blood stirs action. The egret is about to become a feast for an 8-legged army. Ants are on the march, and nothing can rebuff them. The relentless insects form an unbreakable supply line. No morsel is too small to escape the ants' attention, and no part of the late egret is wasted. Everything in this place has a purpose. As her other species do, Madagascar's insects depend on the kindness of humans. Preserving these creatures' habitats means preserving this magical island's capacity to amaze and keeping this part of the planet from vanishing. Madagascar's riches include a wealth of reptile species. From the fearsome Nile crocodile to the cat-eyed snake, the radiated tortoise, the flat-tailed gecko. All these have niches. There's also a reptile family here among the world's best known, yet most mysterious. Early explorers named them with the Greek words for little lion, chameleons. They inhabit the island in huge numbers and great variety. Of 340 known chameleon species, Madagascar is home to 314 and counting. Some researchers believe chameleons originated on the island. Others say the little lions drifted ashore. Whatever their beginnings, chameleons have become fixtures here. Their most impressive adaptation is their hunting style. Sitting all but motionless, they wait for prey. Slowly and precisely, a lizard tracks an insect. When those all-seeing eyes have locked onto the target, the chameleon flicks its tongue, which often is longer than its body. The movement is so quick, it barely registers with the human eye. it's over in a flash. The tongue, which ends in a sticky surface, unfurls with a whip-like motion. A lightning touch, the tongue strikes, and the chameleon is ready to feed again. To survive, these lizards have had to live up to the adjective chameleonic. These reptiles have adapted to farmers' fields, roadside undergrowth, and forests of all sorts. Though differing wildly in looks and size, chameleons share many characteristics. Their feet and toes can cling to nearly any surface. Protruding eyes operate separately, seeing 180 degrees side to side and 90 degrees up and down. Wherever they live, they blend in. Rainforest species are bright, hiding in plain sight. Things change in dry settings, like the spiny forest. Here, rich color would be a death sentence. So these masters of deception wear subtle shades, resembling leaf litter and bark. Other creatures here are in danger, but adaptability has kept chameleon populations high. Adaptability goes only so far, however. Madagascar has seen a dramatic rise in visits by foreigners fascinated by her wildlife.
Ecotourism is a natural thing. The nature of Madagascar is unique, and if people want to see lemurs, if they want to enjoy diversity of plants, they need to come to Madagascar. They don't have another choice. It's not in visiting Costa Rica or in visiting Botswana. They're going to be able to appreciate the uniqueness of the biodiversity of Madagascar.
If the country encourages ecotourism, these lizards and other species could draw enough visitors so that Madagascar can become a self-sustaining paradise instead of seeing its natural heritage fade away. Madagascar is best known for a primate that lives nowhere else. It's the lemur, a species that predates modern apes. Once monkeys and other faster, smarter competitors evolved, lemurs disappeared elsewhere. But not on Madagascar, whose isolation preserved and expanded the lemur line. These animals offer unparalleled insights into the wild world, says conservationist Russ Mittermeier. He's spent nearly 30 years studying Madagascar's lemurs.
Starting to move, huh? A lot of calling today. It's just been non-stop. Is he in the open? Oh yeah, he's a little hidden. They're eating, huh? Eating or just grooming?
No,
grooming, yeah. That baby's big to be sitting on its mother, huh? I'm fascinated by all the lemurs because they're such a unique group and they're so restricted to this one island. So cute.
Lemurs evolved as they did on Madagascar because of endemism.
Endemism is a term that we use to describe a species of plant or animal that occurs only in a particular place and nowhere else in the world. Family group, is it habituated?
Madagascar's lemur story began some 64 million years ago, long after the island had separated from Africa. Scientists believe lemurs may have ridden floating vegetation across the Gulf of Mozambique, finally reaching Madagascar, where they prospered, at least until humans arrived.
All of the giant lemurs that existed here, there were 15 different species of giant lemurs that existed in Madagascar, and they're all gone. So there's been a trend over the past 2,000 years of the largest animals here disappearing.
But others have hung on, evolving distinctive markings, territories, and calls. An early visitor described a lemur taken aboard a ship as exceeding nimble, that it would skip from rope to rope with such agility that it seemed rather to fly than leap, and so familiar to everyone that they would leap on their shoulders, take them fast about the necks, and lick their mouths and faces.
Oh, watch out. Don't fight. Don't fight. Don't take it off. Oh, don't take it off. In this little forest of about 2,000 acres, you have 62 groups of these animals, so they're very densely packed in. But you go further north to some other forest areas, they're still hunted for food.
Despite loss of habitat, lemurs remain an important part of the Malagasy ecosystem. Important populations include the ring-tailed lemur, whose females are dominant over the males. The Indri, known for its eerie, loud song at sunrise. The sifaka, which can hop but are unable to walk. And the golden-crowned sifaka, one of the world's most endangered primates. The sifaka has a large body, long legs, and a gift for jumping, as if propelled by springs. These animals live in southern and southwestern Madagascar, foraging in parties of 2 to 12 individuals. Like all lemurs, they live on plants, even spiny trees, onto which sifakas pounce without harm. No one knows how.
They climb around on this plant in spite of the fact that it has extremely sharp spines, stiff, sharp spines. And how they manage to climb on this and also bounce from tree to tree without getting impaled is still a mystery.
But the sifaka, too, stands in peril. It's still hunted, sometimes for food, and its habitat is shrinking.
Now we're at best at 10% of the original natural vegetation. I think in terms of really intact functioning systems, we may be as low as 5%. And to put that into perspective, if this island is about the size of Texas, a little bit smaller than Texas, and only 10% is left, you're looking at an area that's maybe half the size of the state of New York, a tiny area in global terms where you have concentrated these incredibly unique life forms that are found nowhere else.
Russ Mittermeier loves his work, especially when it involves one lemur species in particular.
Oh, look at him, look at him, look at him come in. Ah, boing. I love their jumps. The jumps they look like they're in slow motion.
Yeah.
Of all the lemurs, the one that I like the best is the Indri. The Indri is the largest of the living lemurs and gets to be about 20 pounds, maybe 3 feet tall if you stretch it out. But it's just a bizarre creature. It looks like it stepped off a spaceship from another planet. It's got these fuzzy ears and these very penetrating eyes. It's got a little tiny stump of a tail. Black and white, the Indris here in Andasi Bay really look like a cross between a teddy bear and a giant panda. And their leaping ability is just fantastic. They can jump through the trees like a kangaroo. They can jump as far as 30 or 40 feet in a single leap. They live in small family groups, usually maximum 5 or 6 individuals, which consists of a father and mother and then infants and juveniles from the past years. And they're leaf-eating primates. They're folivores. They eat mainly young leaves being more nutritious than older, drier leaves, which are mostly cellulose. They eat some fruits and flowers, bark, dirt occasionally to provide additional nutrients. It's a very special creature that has never been kept successfully in captivity. So if you want to see it, you have to come to Madagascar. It's the only place that you can actually get a look at an Indri. But it certainly ranks up there in the top 4 or 5 favorite species for me on Earth.
When the moon rises, a different Madagascar awakens. Cloaked in the inky darkness, a nocturnal throng reveals itself only under the glare of a flashlight. Come morning, troop members summon one another with raucous calls, sometimes audible for as much as half a mile.
Anywhere from 4:30, 5, 6 o'clock, they start singing in the forest, this wailing sound that is basically a territorial call that's calling out to other groups and saying, we're here, don't come into our territory or there's going to be a fight.
These Indri live in the rainforest near the town of Andasi Bay. Once, people here saw the forest and its animals only as raw materials to be consumed. They hunted lemurs, logged trees for lumber and charcoal, and burned the landscape for rice cultivation.
The impact of the land use practices that were brought in from Asia, paddy rice, and from Africa, cattle, were devastating on this environment. And very quickly there was a conversion of natural forests and other natural habitats to degraded grasslands. So if you fly over this country now, especially in the Central Plateau region, you just see devastation. It's a moonscape, and you see some of the worst erosion anywhere on the planet.
The soils of Madagascar are particularly prone to erosion because of a chemical composition. So when the forest cover has been destroyed and when the soils are exposed to heavy rainfall, they tend to dissolve and you see very high level of erosion that are affecting these soils.
But in recent decades, some Malagasy have changed their minds and their behavior.
What people don't realize is that ecotourism actually can be a better, more sustainable economy than the kind of extraction economies that currently exist there. Protecting the environment can actually be good for the economy, can be good for native populations if they learn how to preserve their environment and ways in which that can help them prosper.
When researchers such as Russ began coming to Andasi Bay, they needed help finding the Indri and other species. Residents became guides. The pay was good and quickly flowed into the town's economy. Locals saw that the forest and its animals could make them a living.
Our intention is to really help the government to define a strategy to promote ecotourism in Madagascar and really demonstrate to Malagasy people that biodiversity is an important element of the economic development of their country.
Soon, the Andasi Bay Guides Association had organized around the principle that the region's future depends on ecotourism and research, rather than on lumber, charcoal, rice, and cattle. Meanwhile, Russ Mittermeier was establishing a relationship with the Indri of Andasi Bay. The troupe became highly habituated to humans, permitting close study over generations, as well as delighting visiting scientists. This unique attraction has summoned a growing stream of ecotourists.
These animals represent an enormous economic advantage for the country. These Indris here in Andasi Bay really are worth millions of dollars to Madagascar, to the government, to the local people, in terms of the tourism flow here. You're getting about 30,000 visitors a year coming to this one reserve just to see the Indri, and that's going to increase dramatically in the next few years. So if you do an economic assessment of the value of a single Indri over the course of a generation, it's going to be worth millions of dollars to this country.
The rarest and most endangered lemur is the golden-crowned sifaka, which had never been photographed until 1974. They inhabit a tiny area of mixed hardwoods and evergreens in the northeast, near the town of Darain. Local people revere these animals, but not so newcomers from elsewhere in Madagascar. Some sifaka populations already have been wiped out, and wildlife activists want tighter protection for the golden-crowned sifaka.
We've got to find what's out there, we've got to catalog it, and we've got to use this information to come up with stronger conservation strategies that justify to the country itself, to the government here, and to the world at large that this is a place that's worth conserving.
Lemurs are the test case for Madagascar's efforts to preserve its wild places. If those efforts succeed, Madagascar and the lemur will remain synonymous. If not, the great island will become another place where another beloved species vanished. Wild Madagascar's fate rests with a species that's been here only a short time. Humans came late to Madagascar. Traveling by boat, navigating by the sun and the stars, they arrived only 2,000 years ago from the Pacific and from Africa. landing on vast shores until then empty of human habitation. These explorers stepped into a world that had evolved for millions of years without the presence of man.
Madagascar is very unusual in that it was the last larger landmass to actually be colonized by humans. This is very, very recently colonized piece of our planet. And when people arrived here, they found an incredibly diverse group of animals, big ones, that occurred nowhere else. You had birds, the elephant birds, that grew to be 9 or 10 feet tall and weighed half a ton. You had giant lemurs that grew as large as gorillas. You had 2 species of hippopotamus. You had a whole range of very strange animals, all of which have gone extinct in the past 500 to 2,000 years. So this is a really unusual place that as recently as 1,000 years ago was still minimally inhabited by our own species.
In so rich and welcoming an environment, humans quickly established themselves as hunters and gatherers and farmers. Out of this collision of African and Asian cultures, a Malagasy society evolved. African traditions, such as cattle herding, took root. So did Asian practices, such as growing rice in water-soaked paddies. As the human footprint here grew and deepened, the wilderness had to shrink, sometimes gradually, sometimes dramatically.
Malagasy people have been clearing land not only for rice cultivation, but also for cattle grazing, to really create pasture for cattle to graze. And that has been a major source of deforestation as well.
Fragments of ancient Madagascar remain, evoking times long gone, primal experiences. The quiet and the still we can never quite recapture. The innocence. Even with its enormous losses, Madagascar remains one of the world's richest ecosystems.
This is a showcase. It's a mini museum of what exists here in Madagascar. In this little forest, you have an incredible diversity of life forms. You probably have on the order of 150 to 200 tree species in this forest, compared to maybe a dozen in a temperate forest. And you have a whole range of lemurs, chameleons, amphibians, frogs of various kinds. A whole diversity of birds, insects. The majority of the insects, I would say, here are not studied in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure that if you went out and collected insects of various kinds, you come up with a whole range of new species.
The Malagasy stewardship of their resources must extend to all corners of the island and its dramatically different environments.
There's a whole range of things here to be discovered. And yet, at the same time, as we're making these new discoveries, the forest is going downhill. So it's a race against time.
In places like Madagascar, what you have is you have such explosive growth of population, it's beyond the sustainability of the environment in which they live. And this is where governments have a responsibility to be able to step in, to be able to alleviate some of these challenges.
To see Madagascar's circumstance for better and for worse, the best perspective is from the air.
Okay, off we go over the village of Vanishing. Now, if you look down at the forest, just the diversity of greens and the diversity of shapes of the here, including the diadem seafox, which is one of the endangered ones, the indri, which is endangered, the black and white ruffed lemur, one of the subspecies of black and white ruffed lemur, which is now in the critically endangered category. Look at this stretch here. Beautiful, beautiful forest. It's so sad that this is really, at best, a few percentage points of what remains of the land area of Madagascar. But hopefully, these protected areas that now exist will be able to be maintained into the future, and that will also be able to create more of them.
Slash and burn agriculture, rice farming, and cattle ranching have hammered the land.
Look at all the erosion here in the rice paddies. It's all silted up.
Less than 10% of Madagascar is still in its natural state.
Madagascar economy is still largely based on natural resource extraction, but we can see things changes, and the extraction is not anymore, the model they want to implement. They want to really use a more sustainable approach.
Preservation could fight soil runoff and loss of forest. To build a self-sustaining way of life, conservationists want to protect important species like lemurs, reptiles such as tortoises and chameleons, even insects.
The forest in Madagascar, but also wherever you are in the world, is providing ecological processes that are tremendously important for economic life of people.
Wildlife draws tourists and scientists, a key and expanding element in Madagascar's economy.
It's important to recognize that the rural communities living in proximity to these key parks and reserves in Madagascar, these rural communities are very poor. Per capita income in this country is on the order of $200 a year. Very, very low. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. One of the things that's very encouraging here in Madagascar is that you've got the development of guide associations. People with a very low level of formal education, having taught themselves French, English, Italian, German, Japanese, the scientific names. They know where all the animals are. They can take you out and show you just about anything that you might want to see here. And as a result, these guides who have organized themselves to take visiting Americans, Europeans, Japanese out into the forest to see what's there, in the high season, they can be making $50 to $100 a day. So this is a very significant leap for these people who have recognized that biodiversity is an economic asset for them.
As the ancient island tries to balance wildness and modernity, the world will be watching to see if a modern nation can succeed in keeping its treasures from disappearing.
This is a classic conflict where our economy has a short-run perspective rather than a long-term perspective. If we can get people to look around the corner, what we'll often find is that there is a better economy, a more sustainable economy, a more prosperous economy by, in fact, protecting our environment and conserving our natural resources, conserving wildlife, than taking a short-run perspective, which is jobs now versus our environment later.
Madagascar's future may play out in tragedy or in triumph. Until then, it will remain a timeless place, a setting of vast possibilities and eerie intimacies. It is a place of revelations, so rife with life in all its shapes, that a glance can summon the sublime, the infinite, the wild, where natural wonders inspire hope, even as they face challenges to humankind's basic values.
This is your bank account, It's deeply anchored. And if we want to change these practices, so we have to really integrate the human dimension into conservation models. We are making the villains, if you will, the good guys, in providing them a way to conserve their assets, basically.
Madagascar is special in that you can look back into the past and see what wonderful things existed, and 5 minutes later, in another area, just a short distance away, you can see what could happen in the future if we're not careful. The kinds of destruction and loss of natural environments, and ultimately our own future that could result.
Here on Madagascar, the struggle continues between the grinding forces of destruction and the will to save irreplaceable treasures found nowhere else in the world, the elusive gems of a vanishing planet.
La musique, à l'appareil, le diable de commandement. C'est Maréchal Valédé.
Madagascar is famous as the home of the lemur,
Envoyez la musique.
the chameleon, and a host of other exotic species, all evolved in unique ways thanks to the Great Island's isolation and wide range of ecosystems. But as diverse as Madagascar's animal and insect life may be, they pale in comparison with her plant life.